Smriti Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram. There are journeys we plan. There are journeys we take because we need a break. And then there are journeys that somehow seem to find us. A journey that begins as a simple trip, but somewhere along the way becomes a search for silence, a search for meaning, and perhaps a search for something within ourselves that we had forgotten. My journey to Sringeri was one such journey. I had seen photographs of Sringeri. I had heard stories about Sri Adi Shankaracharya. I had read about the Sharadamba, the Guru Parampara, the sacred Tunga River, and the magnificent temples. But there is a difference between knowing about a place and standing in that place. And when I finally arrived, I understood that Sringeri is not merely a destination on a map. Sringeri is an experience, a place where nature, devotion, knowledge, and silence seem to meet. A place where you don't simply travel, you pause, and perhaps you begin to listen. The journey itself was beautiful. As the city slowly disappeared behind me, concrete gave way to trees, traffic gave way to winding roads, noise gave way to the sound of rain, and the Western Ghats slowly began revealing themselves. Huge trees stood on their side of the road, almost like ancient guardians welcoming a traveler. Mist moved across the hills, rain washed the leaves, and every turn seemed to reveal another picture that nature had painted. I found myself looking out of the window more than I was looking at the road. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. I stopped thinking about how far I had to go. I simply enjoyed being there. Perhaps that is the first lesson a pilgrimage teaches us. The destination is not everything. Sometimes the journey itself is the blessing. And then, after all those winding roads, I saw it, the towering Gopuram of Sringeri. For a few seconds, I simply looked at it. I had seen it in the photographs, but photographs cannot capture what happens inside you when you see a sacred place for the first time. There was no dramatic moment, no thunder, no miracle, just a quiet feeling, almost as if something inside me whispered, "You have arrived." And suddenly, the journey felt worth every mile. Sringeri carries something that is difficult to describe: continuity. For more than 12 centuries, the flame of knowledge has been passed from guru to disciple. One Jagadguru, then another, generation after generation. Kingdoms disappeared, empires rose and fell, languages changed, technology changed, the world changed. But here, the Guru Parampara continued. And standing before the portraits of the Jagadgurus, I couldn't help thinking, how many seekers have stood here before me? How many came carrying questions? How many came carrying pain? How many came simply seeking peace? And how many left with something they could never quite put into words? That is the extraordinary power of a living tradition. It doesn't merely preserve the past, it keeps the past alive in the present. Walking through the streets of Sringeri felt completely different from walking through an ordinary town. There was a moment, but there was no hurry. There were pilgrims, but there was no chaos. There were shops, but somehow the temple remained the heart of everything. And then I walked toward the sacred temple complex. The closer I came, the more the sounds changed. The ringing of the bells, the chanting of mantras, the footsteps of devotees, the fragrance of incense. And somewhere beneath all of those sounds, a deep silence. It reminded me of a beautiful Sanskrit prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaveryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we work together with strength. May our learning be filled with light. And may there be no hatred between us. That's the spirit of a place dedicated to knowledge, not merely learning, but learning with humility. Every auspicious journey in our tradition begins with remembrance of Ganesha. And here too, the journey begins with Ganapati. I passed before Torana Ganapati and I felt appropriate because every journey has obstacles. Some are on the road, some are in circumstances, and some are inside our own minds. We ask Ganeta not merely to remove obstacles from our path, but to give us the wisdom to recognize which obstacles actually matter. And then came the moment when the story of Sringeri became much deeper for me because behind this sacred institution, behind this Guru Parampara, behind this extraordinary spiritual legacy stands one remarkable personality, Sri Adi Shankaracharya, a young monk who walked across Bharat. Think about that for a moment. No aeroplanes, no trains, no highways, no internet, no social media. And yet, his ideas traveled farther than any modern communication network could carry them. He didn't build an empire of land, he built an empire of knowledge. He didn't seek political power, he sought truth. And his life was incredibly short. Tradition remembers him as having lived only about 32 years. 32 years, and yet his influence continues more than a millennium later. That's not merely a life, that's a legacy. There is a beautiful story associated with Sringeri. Adi Shankaracharya is said to have witnessed a cobra spreading its hood over a pregnant frog, protecting it from the harsh sun. Predator and prey standing together, nature itself appearing to pause its laws for a moment. And perhaps Shankara saw in that moment something deeper, a place where hostility could give way to compassion, a place where opposites could coexist, a place worthy of becoming a seed of knowledge. And Sringeri became one of the great spiritual centers of Bharat. One of Adi Shankaracharya's most famous teachings begins with words that remain incredibly relevant even today. Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate, Samprapte, Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dugrung Karane. Seek Govinda, seek Govinda. When the final moment arrives, mere intellectual knowledge cannot save us. Think about how relevant that is today. We spend our lives collecting things: money, titles, achievements, recognition, followers, and yet none of these answer the most fundamental question: who am I? Then I encountered the Vidyashankara's temple, and honestly, there is one of those places where photographs simply don't do justice. The architecture, the stonework, the pillars, the proportions, the atmosphere, everything makes you stop and look. Our ancestors did not simply build temples, they created spaces where architecture itself became a form of contemplation. You look at the stone and you wonder about the hands that shaped it. You look at the pillars and wonder about the minds that designed them. You look at the temple and realize that civilization is not only about what we build, it is about what we choose to preserve. And Sringeri has preserved something priceless, a connection between knowledge and spirituality, between science and sacredness, between the visible world and the invisible one. And then there is the Tunga, the sacred river flowing peacefully beside Sringeri. I spend some time simply looking at her. No explanation, no philosophy, just watching. The river doesn't hurry. It doesn't announce where it is going. It simply flows. And suddenly, the river became a teacher. It reminded me that life also has its own rhythm. We struggle so much to control everything: our careers, our relationships, our future, our circumstances. But perhaps life is asking us to learn something simpler: flow. Do what you must, give what you can, keep moving, and trust the journey. The Tunga was flowing long before I arrived. It will continue flowing long after I leave. And that realization is strangely humbling. There was another part of Sringeri that touched me deeply: the path leading toward the Guru Sannidhi. Huge trees, greenery everywhere, rain soaked paths, an atmosphere that seemed almost untouched by time. And along the way, the words of Shankara, questions, reflections, reminders about life. And one question kept returning: who am I? Not what is my profession, not how much I achieved, not what do people think of me, but who am I? Adi Shankaracharya gave humanity a radical answer. We are not merely the body, we are not merely the mind. There is something deeper, something untouched by success and failure, something that remains. And perhaps the most famous expression of that realization comes from the Nirvana Shatkam. Manobuddhyahankara chittani naham na cha shrota jihve na cha grana netre na cha vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu chidananda rupas sivoham sivoham. I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the ego, I am not the senses, I am pure consciousness, I am bliss, I am Shiva, Shivoham, Shivoham. These are not merely words to listen to, they are words to sit with, words to contemplate, words that can change the way we look at our own life. And then came one of the most precious moments of this journey: the darshan of Jagadguru Sri Vidushekara Bharati Mahasannidhanam. There are moments when you don't know what to say. You simply fold your hands, you stand quietly, and you receive. Perhaps that's what darshan really means. Not simply seeing, but allowing yourself to be seen. For a few moments, the mind becomes quiet. And in that quietness, something within you settles. Sringeri also carries another extraordinary tradition: the worship of Sri Chandramaulishwara, a sacred Shivalinga associated with Adi Shankaracharya and the ancient spiritual tradition of Sringeri. And alongside it, the revered Ratnagarbha Ganapati. When you stand before these sacred symbols, you begin to understand that the strength of Sanatana Dharma lies not merely in its age, but in its living practice. The prayers are still offered, the lamps are still lit, the mantras are still chanted, The Guru Parampara still continues and the sacred river still flows. Adi Shankaracharya's vision extended far beyond one place. He established four great seats of learning and spiritual tradition in the four directions of Bharat. Sringeri in the south, Dwarka in the west, Puri in the east, Jyotirmat in the north. Four directions, one spiritual vision, and the heart of that vision, Advaita. The recognition that beneath all apparent differences, there is one underlying reality. That idea is perhaps more relevant today than ever. In a world that constantly tells us how different we are, Advaita quietly asks, what if beneath all these differences, we are one? And then Sringeri gave me one of its most beautiful gifts, rain. The trees became darker, the paths became wet, the air became cooler, water streamed down the roads, and everything looked freshly created. I walked through the rain, and for once, I wasn't thinking about the next thing. I wasn't thinking about yesterday. I was simply there, and maybe that's what a pilgrimage really does. It doesn't necessarily change the world around you, it changes the way you experience it. The same rain, the same trees, the same road suddenly feel different because you are different. And then came night, the Kopram illuminated against the dark sky, the Vidyashankara temple glowing softly, the Tunga bridge stretching across the river, the reflections dancing on the water. Sringeri at night has a beauty of its own. During the day, you see the temples. At night, you feel them. And standing there, I felt something I hadn't expected, gratitude. Gratitude that such places still exist. Gratitude that generations before us protected them. Gratitude that traditions older than most civilizations are still alive. And gratitude simply for being there. The next morning, I saw the Gopuram again. Same temple, same architecture, same sky, but somehow it felt different. Perhaps the temple hadn't changed. Perhaps I had. That's the strange beauty of a spiritual journey. You travel thousands of miles only to discover that the real journey was happening inside you. And as I looked one more time at the trees, the water, the temples, the river, the Guru Parampara, one question remained: who am I? Maybe I don't have the answer yet. Maybe that's okay. Perhaps the purpose is not to find an instant answer. Perhaps the purpose is to keep asking until the noise becomes silence, until the ego becomes humility, until the search itself becomes the path. And perhaps that's the gift of Sringeri. It doesn't force an answer upon you, it simply creates the space for you to discover your own. Eventually, every journey has to end. The bags are packed, the road calls again, the temple fades into the distance, the Tunga continues flowing, and you leave. But something stays behind, or perhaps something comes back with you. A little more silence, a little more gratitude, a little more humility, a little more awareness of how small we are and how vast this civilization truly is. Finally, there are places we visit and there are places we carry. Sringeri is a place I will carry. I may forget some of the roads, I may forget the exact sequence of the journey, but I will remember the rain. I will remember the ancient stones. I will remember the sound of the Tunga. I will remember the temple bells. I will remember the Guru Parampara. I will remember the darshan. And most of all, I will remember the silence, because somewhere between the mountains, the temples, the river, the chants, and the footsteps of Adi Shankaracharya, I discovered something very simple. The peace we spend our entire lives searching for may not be somewhere far away. It may have been waiting quietly within us. And perhaps that is why Sringeri is not just a place you visit. It is a place that stays with you. So, if life ever becomes too loud, if your mind ever becomes too restless, if you ever feel that you need to step away from the world for a moment, go visit Sringeri. Walk beside the Tunga. Stand before Mother Sharada. Walk through the ancient temples. Sit beneath the trees. Listen to the chants and ask yourself just once, who am I? Maybe you won't find the answer that day, but perhaps you will find the silence in which the answer can finally be heard. And when you leave, you may discover that you didn't really come to Sringeri to find God. You came to remember the divine that was already within you. Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. I am consciousness. I am bliss. I am Shiva. Maybe the wisdom of Bhagavad Pada Adi Shankaracharya continue to illuminate our path. May the grace of Mother Sharada fill our hearts with knowledge and humility. May the blessings of the Guru Parampara remain within us. And may the sacred Tunga continue to flow, reminding us to keep moving, keep seeking, and keep returning to the self. Oh, that's Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.